Zangrandi. I'm the Secretary General of E.DSO, the European Association representing and advocating for the industrial and entrepreneurial interests of the distribution system operators of the European Union. Well, when we approached this day and this afternoon, I started receiving a couple of questions, basically. And questions that have been repeated by friends with whom I was sharing a coffee before. Question number one was, isn't that too much a pretentious title for an event? What does it really mean, a multi-scale calibration approach for a digitalized energy system transformation? Well, it's very technical. I will not entertain you on the technical side of this because I'm not enough of a technician to do that. But we are very happy when we came up to this title because it has got a whole philosophy behind and within. And the philosophy is that this today is quite an important public step in joining forces between the operators, DG CONNECT and DG ENER-DG. And this is very much a multi-scale because we have got a reciprocal, thorough knowledge of the problems of the DSOs and how the legislative pieces that have succeeded themselves within the institution in the past years tried to tackle this evolution, and where is the space in front of us that still must be charted by the legislators and by the industry. And this is the scope of having this approach for a digitalized energy system transformation. We know we are talking about that since years, that with the digitalization, that digitalization is not the future, but is the present, etc., etc. But still, digitalization is progressing within the energy system, is not a given for everybody at every level. So this is one of the things that we would like to pinpoint today and to see what is still needed. And the second one, in terms of question, was, that was recent. 5 minutes ago, the last time that I was put, this question was, whose was this idea? Was that DG ENER? Was that DG CONNECT? Was it yours? Well, it was a spontaneous idea coming out from chats and with the contribution of the quick ability to analyze the situation by friends that we know very well within DG ENER-DG and friends that we know very well within DG CONNECT. And these acts as a thank to those that have pushed us, E.DSO, to find the way to ask, first of all, and then give a substance to DG ENER and DG CONNECT in order to converge on a program that promises to be interesting, probably not revolutionary, but this is the first time that we talk about these things all together in a restricted circle, even if out there connected with us are a couple of hundreds people who register, and I hope that everybody has shown up this afternoon. So, as the people say in Brussels, without further ado, let me kick off this meeting, and I am asking Vincent Beruto and Max Lemke to join me on the stage for their opening statements. The introduction is the introduction to the action plan on the digitalization of the energy sector. Please, you have the word, Vincent, and after that, Max. Please, Vincent.
Thank you very much, Roberto, and thank you to E.DSO for inviting me and for organizing this event, which is very timely because on the 18th of October, we adopted our action plan on the digitization of the energy system. My name is Vincent Berreteau. I work at DG ENER, and I'm the head of unit in charge of research, innovation, competitiveness, and digitization. And we've been in our unit coordinating the preparation of this action plan, but we haven't worked alone. I mean, we've worked very closely with several colleagues within DG Energy. There are specialists working on cybersecurity, others working on internal market, others on consumers. So it's really a collective effort. And we've worked very, very closely with other DGs of the Commission, in particular DG CONNECT, and I'm very grateful to Max and his unit for helping us preparing this action plan together. So DG CONNECT, DG ENER worked very closely on this. I'll go on, Max, and then I'll let you, or unless you want to introduce yourself now.
I could just say, yes, we work very, very closely together. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of DG CONNECT here. And we are co-responsible in a way, but we are the younger brother in a way on the digitalization of action plan for energy, because digitalization is in the title, but obviously the colleagues in DG ENER are in the lead on this one. We are
human twins.
Yeah, and we not digital but human twins. And just for me, I'm responsible in CONNECT for Internet of Things, but I'm also coordinating in CONNECT the activities on agriculture, energy, and mobility. And in particular, we are responsible for the implementation, not for the legislation, of the data spaces in energy, in mobility, and agriculture. So.
Yeah, thank you, Max. And that was very important to have you liaising also with all the other units in DG CONNECT, which are working on digitalization and partly on the energy sector as well. So if we move to the next slide, I think there's no point in front of this audience to recall why we did that action plan. I think we know that as our energy system is becoming more and more decentralized, electrified, decarbonized, we need more and more digitization, and digitization is happening everywhere in the system. We've got a number of applications that are well known. I mean, we have seen how digital solutions can help in the predictive maintenance of renewable energy sources, in grid optimization, in energy demand reduction, in energy management systems, in buildings, industry, in demand response. I mean, the applications are countless. But we know as well that there are a number of barriers that prevent us from multiplying these applications more widely in the energy system in Europe. And what we did at DG ENER is that we launched a public consultation at the end of last year, which closed in January. And we would then organize thematic seminars to explore several issues more specifically and understand the needs of the market actors. What barriers are they facing? And our action plan was precisely meant to overcome these barriers. So we are responding to the needs of the stakeholders as we listen to them. If we move to the next slide. What we've heard during our consultation process, which was very thorough, is that we need to articulate the action plan according to 6 main building blocks, which you see on that slide. First of all, one thing that came time and again was that we need to foster the access and exchange of energy data. That is key if we want to unlock the potential of digital solutions to create new energy services for the benefit of energy consumers. Secondly, we've realized, listening to the stakeholders, that we won't achieve what we want if we are not creating the right infrastructure, physical infrastructure. So we need to step up investments in smart grids. Third, very importantly, we need to put consumers at the center of our action plan and see how digital solutions can help empower consumers and make them active in the energy transition. And fourth, we look at the other side of the coin and not just how ICT solutions help us save energy and use more renewables, but also what is the energy consumption of ICT and what are the risks, starting with the cybersecurity risk and the risk in terms of privacy. So that's the fourth action. The fifth action is about greening the ICT sector. How can we reduce the energy consumption of ICT and make them greener? And last but not least, and that's the sixth building block, which you see here on the right-hand side, is what measures can we think of to foster a greater coordination at European level and also at international level. So moving to the first, what I want to say now, I mean, we've got Max and I about 20 minutes, so we want to cover all these 6 areas and give you a bit more details where we think it's necessary. So if we move to the first one, that's the exchange of data. When we organize our thematic seminar together with DG Connect, I mean, there were 3. One thing I've learned myself is that we can't talk about data exchange without having use cases. So we need to identify the main use cases that we want to focus on, or at least the priority ones, the one we want to start with. And the 3 that came very prominently during the consultation were A, flexibility services, B, the smart and bidirectional charging of electric vehicles, and 3, for the uptake of smart buildings and renovation, which is also a very important topic for the energy policy. And the idea here is to create a common European energy data space, which means an interoperable framework of common rules and practices that are specific to the energy sector to share and jointly process data. And that energy data space need to be accompanied with a proper governance structure, which we need to define, and it needs to build on the set of energy and digital legislation that exists. Max will say a bit more about the what exists in the digital world. As far as the energy world is concerned, we've got the Fit for 55 package of last year, which was adopted last year, where we introduced provisions in the revised legislation, be it the EPBD or the Renewable Energy Sources Directive, to foster the exchange of data. So we want to use this lever now to promote this common European energy data space. We want as well to use the new legislation in preparation, like the implementing acts that are being prepared now within DG ENER. Very practically, as a first step, we want to convert the Smart Grid Task Force, which some of you may know because you're part of it. I see a few who I met very recently in a Smart Grid Task Force meeting, to change that task force into a formal expert group and to make it more official, more effective, but also with a wider set of responsibilities. And we want to create within that group a specific working group looking at data for energy. So that is a very, very concrete, very practical step, which we will take before March next year, and which will, in a sense, follow the consultation process that we've had. But on this slide, what may be a bit new to you is the Common European Energy Data Space. So I'll let Max explain how that data space fits within the overall digital policy strategy. Next slide, please.
Yeah, what I would like to do is just run you very quickly through what you could look at when it is about data spaces. So when you look at the EU data strategy, you will see that it has basically 2 pillars. One is the cloud actions. What's data without processing? So if you want to process your data, you need the infrastructure to oh yes, we are on mic. Yeah, you need to process the data, and then the other one is the data actions. So the data spaces, building the data spaces, but also the data regulation. In both of them, we have again 2 pillars. One is the implementation route, which is usually done through the digital program. That means helping to build the cloud infrastructure. That means helping to build the vertical data spaces and the coordination across the data spaces. And then there is the legislative part in that sense as well. That's in cloud, it's the rule book for the cloud, because that's how everybody can operate under the same rules, be it a big hyperscaler from the United States or China, or a small cloud provider in Europe. And on the other hand, the data legislation, there I'm thinking of the Data Governance Act, which provides the overall governance structure for data spaces, for sectoral data spaces, and they must be interoperable, as you can imagine. For example, when it comes to EV charging, that's the link to the mobility data space or to buildings. And there we are building the energy data space, we have some projects running, innovation projects running at the moment on building these data spaces, and we'll extend that to some deployment projects under Digital Europe to come in 2023, 24. So can I have the next slide? Now, just for the sectoral, for the legislation, the digital legislation is kind of on the top. The sectoral legislation that you have in the different sectors, that's important, and that has to be continued to be applied, obviously, but eventually also updated according to the new digital legislation that is coming. So I would like to just refine the word that I say we have to be interoperable. And I see interoperable in two ways: interoperable across borders in Europe, and interoperable in a sense that across sectors. So if I on the left-hand side look at across borders, we are supporting so-called operational digital platforms. A small project, 4 million to start on that has just been called for, so it's still open. And there we look at retrofitting the existing energy and transport infrastructures with the required, and that's what we call cross-border digital infrastructure. And we'll build and integrate what is existing in member states at operators like you, like the DSOs, for example. So that's across borders. And when I look at the sector coupling, I usually try to use one of these use cases that we have where we want to optimize the use of renewable energy or production and use of renewable energies. And there we have things like the efficient integration of the renewable energies, but at the same time, the use in smart homes and the use in EV charging. And with the EV charging, we bring the bidirectional in. So it could as well be batteries at home or so. But that's the whole picture. And this optimization is very much dependent on, or is only enabled now by digital enablers. Without the digital, without the cloud, without the data spaces, this would not be possible. And with that, I would like to link to Vincent's next point. A key in this optimization, in this use case, is what we call a digital twin. So digital twin means a digital representation that's dynamic, that updates automatically with the real world. And I think that's a common baseline for all these things. And that also links to the next pillar of the plan.
Thank you, Max, for the transition. So that's the next slide. And indeed, we're linking to the second building block of this action plan, which is about infrastructure investments. And there we, as Max said, develop a first action, which is working with E.DSO-DG and E.DSO to create a digital twin of the electricity grid. And you should hear more about that in the next few weeks, because there will be a signature of a declaration of intent between the two organizations kicking off the process, and there will be support from the Horizon Europe program for that. And that will be a virtual model of the electricity grid, which will help making it more effective, more efficient. So it's a very big measure here, but it's not the only one. We want in parallel to work with national regulatory authorities to help them define smart grid indicators and set targets in terms of investments in smart grids, and also ensure the monitoring of these investments so that we can step up the money that is being invested in the development of the smart grid network in Europe. At the same time, in the communication of the 18th of October in our action plan, we urge member states also to accelerate the rollout of smart meters. At the moment, the rollout is a little bit more than 50%. I think we're around 51%. And this is not enough if we want to fully reap the benefits of digitalization, and if we want to use these smart meters to empower consumers. Empowering consumers is the subject of the next building block. If we change slide, please. Consumers should be at the center of the energy system. We've been saying that for many years now. It was already the motto in our clean energy package. It's been repeated in the Green Deal. It has been repeated again in our action plan, and this is very true. First, we need to make sure that those rights, which are being defined in the internal energy market and that apply offline, should also apply online, and cross-cutting measures that is being done at Commission level is a fitness check of EU consumer law on digital fairness, which will address the issue of consumer protection. But in the action plan, you will also find measures that are specific to the energy sector, starting with the development of strategies to engage consumers in the design and implementation of accessible and affordable digital tools. There are a number of tools that can be used to help consumers save energy, use more renewable energies. We also want in this action plan to develop a common reference framework for an app that help consumer reduce their energy use, but also shift their loads according to the congestions on the network, especially during peak hours. That's something which Max will detail a little more, because this is work that receives a lot of political visibility and in my opinion can be very, very effective. But before I pass the floor to Max, let me mention also that this is not the only tool that we want to support through our action plan. We also want to develop tools that help the establishment and the implementation of energy communities, together with guidance and together with a first-of-a-kind platform that will use digital technologies, digital solutions to foster these energy communities. And last but not least, we also want to empower the workforce. And for that reason, we want to develop a large-scale partnership on the digitalization of the energy value chain as part of the EU Pact for Skills, and especially next year, which will be the year of skills, EU Year of Skills. And that's actually a very important aspect, a very important issue, which was also coming very prominently from more consultation. But a little more on the app, because we thought it's important and it is very relevant for DSO. So Max.
Yeah, I would like to go into a bit more detail on the app, because I see a key role for the DSOs in that. So that's why also that's one of the issues we want to highlight here. Can I have next slide, please? When you look at the communication, you will see a sentence, a short sentence that said it all. Working with member states, the European Commission will develop a common reference framework. So we developed the reference framework, not the app itself, including an open source implementation for a consumer application that allows them to make voluntary reductions. So it's not forcing the consumer, it's voluntary reductions in energy consumptions and help them in reducing their energy costs. So if you want to have an app and want to get the user, the consumer, there has to be something in for that. And that's the money. Yeah, so the money is in that for them. And this will lead to a standardized reference application that will be developed in close collaboration with energy providers and with organizations like yours. So we think of reducing the energy consumptions and bills, of helping them, the consumer, to prevent power shortages and blackouts, and also getting a real-time data exchange to reduce the energy demand costs, the costs, and the greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. And when I put that into, this is work in progress. So what I present here, don't nail us on each individual point. We can update this also concerning your input, but it shows why DSOs are important on this one. So we have some data sources that we want to use for that app. And that's the congestion data, for example, from TSOs and DSOs. That's the data on energy generation from network operators, from suppliers. And that's also consumption patterns that are from the past and make a prognosis for the future, for example. We have a data repository, which I would say that's in a way the emerging data space. And there we need tools on top of it, which is data analytic tools, visualization, intelligence from consumption, weather, foresight data. But for me, this is all anonymized data. So it does not yet go into GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, because it's more broad. And last not least, what we want to get is a consumer app that provides actionable, and important is actionable, suggestions to consumers that optimize, reduce their consumption, that reduces their bills to get them, otherwise they will not do it, and that help in crisis situations, for example, prevent outages. And At the moment, we want a first blueprint already by February in 23. So that's very soon. And we are working together with some people who do a landscaping analysis for us, what is already existing, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. When you know EcoWatt, for example, or some Danish applications, there is already a lot on the market. So we want to start from that and see further. We involve the Smart Grids Task Force to link to the industry. And we also involve, like, for example, the member states through the electricity coordination group. And we will use our innovation project, innovation projects that I cannot name yet, that will help us do some piloting on that. So we really get that going. So we want a blueprint by, let's say, February, and by end of the year, we would have something more mature, which is already piloted. Yeah, that was a bit of detail about the energy app. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's quite relevant for the ESOs indeed. If we move to the next slide, please. So we look now at the other side of the coin. As I said, cybersecurity is one aspect we have been focusing on very much in the action plan. There we have cross-sector legislation that needs to directly the Cyber Resilience Act, or 18 October, there was also the Council recommendation on critical infrastructure, which the Commission proposed, so that this is really cross-sector and not specific to energy. But on top of that, we want specific action in the energy sector, starting with a network code for cybersecurity aspects of cross-border electricity flows, which is something we've been working on for some months now, and which should be ready early next year. And we might go the same way in the gas sector, I mean, pending, of course, the negotiation on the gas decarbonization package. Looking at the other side of the coin again, next slide, we look at the energy impact of ICT solutions. I mean, we know that the net impact of ICT in the energy sector is largely positive, but nonetheless, there is an impact on the energy consumption of ICT, which we want to address in this action plan. And there we've got a series of measures. I don't have time to list them all, but we have measures targeting on eco-label, eco-design and labeling, energy labeling of products, for instance, an energy label for computers. We have measures targeting communication networks, which energy use is increasing, for instance, with a code of conduct for their sustainability. We look at data centers, which energy consumption is also growing. And there we introduced the idea of an environmental label for data center building on the revised energy efficiency directive. And last but not least, we look again at the energy consumed by cryptocurrencies. And there we propose to develop an energy efficiency label for blockchains. That's perhaps a little less relevant for the ESO, so I passed through that slide quite quickly. I want to spend a bit more time on the EU coordinated approach in my last 2 minutes, because this is very important. There, first and foremost, we want to help member states implement investments in digital solutions through their national energy and climate plans. I mean, they are under revision. I mean, they should, member states publish their draft next year, and the final version in mid-2024. It's a unique opportunity to stimulate investments in digital solutions. So we've provided guidance along these lines in the guidance document that we adopted mid-October to member states. We want also to do the same in the digital decade roadmap. I mean, that's more the work of DG CONNECT, of course, and in their recovery and resilience plan. I mean, the member states now have to develop a new chapter of their plan to address the REPowerEU priorities. And this, again, is a good opportunity to foster investments in digital and energy efficiency and renewable. So that's a good tool. Then this is one thing. We also want to use the EU funding sources to go in the same direction, starting with Horizon Europe. We should be able, in the coming days, we thought it would be this week, but it probably would not be this week, to publish a work program for 23 and 24. And you will see there are many priorities developed in partnership with DG CONNECT that address the use of digital technologies in the energy system. The same for Digital Europe program, of course, cohesion policy support in the LIFE program as well. There will be priorities along these lines. And for the rest, it's more detail. So I'm not covering that, except perhaps the last point, which is about international collaboration, because there we want to use the tools at our disposal, be it the Clean Energy Ministerial, Mission Innovation, the work we're doing with the International Energy Agency to also promote collaboration with countries outside the European Union borders on cybersecurity, on data privacy, on energy consumption, all these aspects that I mentioned, which in many cases are best approached at international level. Last slide is, I think, just to say that you can see that this action plan is quite broad, quite comprehensive, really based on consultations that we've had. It's an action plan that comes at an intersection of digital and energy policies, and this is why we are jointly presenting it now with Max from DG CONNECT. And it's an action plan that needs the involvement of whole stakeholders, and so we really hope, and I think I'm speaking also on your behalf, Max, to see DSOs involved very much in the implementation of this action plan, so that we can deliver on all the actions that we put in there. Thank you, Max, for accompanying me in that presentation, and thank you all for your attention. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you all very much. And I agree fully with our collaboration and also the role of the DSOs. Yeah, the role of the DSOs is important. Before I leave at some point this meeting, I would like to just introduce Patricia Arson, Svet Mihayev, Monty Ahl, and Rolf Riemenschneider from my team. Just with who you can discuss here in the coffee break. If I should be there, because I have another meeting at 4. At 3.
And Carsten is here representing DG Energy, and we've got some people behind their computer also following that: George Paonescu, Pablo Riesco, Cristiana Marchitelli, Giulia Serra, Kasia Greek, and others working on the action plan. You take me a little bit by surprise. I have to remember all the names of my people working on it, but I think I've been exhaustive. Thanks.
That was just, I'm sorry for that, but I did it because I will have to leave, and then I didn't want to let loose ends. Yeah?
You guys are born entertained. We must invite them. Oh, thank you very much, because you offered a quick, but for you, offered the Digitalization Act, also already answering some of the questions. Thank you for the presence of all of your colleagues. Without them, this wouldn't have been possible, and the staff of E.DSO is to be thanked at the end of this. But it has been quite a good and common effort. Thank you very much. We are looking forward to this application. Obviously, is very much expected. I think it is a hand that is extended to a larger public. Successful from the point of view of the institutions on one side, and I believe that that will integrate the different and so many applications that are already there by the DSOs that need probably to be reassembled and reinterpreted in the view of what you are going to offer there. And this could be a common effort that we can also do. And I'm talking here to the many friends that are connected from the DSO world, and that everybody has certainly thought, oh, well, we have got our own application. Yes, but they must interact. And so probably a good re-engineering in this sense could be needed in the near future. Thank you very much. So now I've asked Richard to join me on the stage. She is online. Sorry, I don't have the list of those online. Francesco Bonfiglio, CEO of Gaia X from Italy. I know he's online. Welcome, Francesco. Welcome, of course, Claire as well. And
good afternoon, everybody.
Ale, CEO of Feeware.
Feeware, yeah, hello.
Online also? Yes, okay. And Jens Hjort-Schwee is here. Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's just nice to have a human being on the stage. Yes, so welcome very much, Francesco, Claire, and Ulrich here. And you have seen also for a few seconds something on the screen before that is coming from the most resistant secret E.DSO drawers, but I will show it to you later on. It is the technology radar that we are working on. And it is something that is still under elaboration, and we are still testing how far can we go as DSO in there, but gives a perfect look to what we think will be the digitalized future and the technological evolution of the DSO world in the near future. So as you see here, we have charted what is the impact on DSO of many technologies, and there is a lot of digital in there. If you see and if you have a quick view to that, and all of them are not super advanced or whatever, but they are extremely important for the evolution of the DSOs. And there is a vector here, which is this one, starting from the center and going up on the left for those who see, and that is a lot of digitalization. That is a lot of intelligence that will be required over the next 10 years to evolve in the right digital direction, the DSOs. The scope is not to open a discussion on every point that is there. There are a different level of intensity. There are different level, of course, of readiness of those technology that are to be adopted by the DSOs. But this is our approach. So we are working as DSO world, as DSO family on these technologies in order to render them available into our business. And these are the directions of our future investments. So before everybody takes a snapshot of these, take it away and go to the discussion. So first reaction from Francesco, Claire, and Ulrich to the presentation of the plan from the Commission. Who is willing to start? Claire, maybe?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
So as a big DSO, you start.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry to be away, but I had to do basically. I had the coronavirus, and it's hard. So my first reaction is it's very exciting. Actually, I have the feeling that we have a lot of things to do. And also the picture that you show just in front of us really demonstrate that we have a lot of things to do, and there are a lot of opportunity for us. And my main concern is how long it will take and how much it will cost and which kind of organization transformation do we have to do to be able to get the value of all of this technology. So I think that technology is one thing that can have a very strong impact, but the main issue for us is to make it applicable in our real life.
So you're pointing out the difference between wish and reality. What is the reaction of the other panelists here? Jenks, what is your reaction? You were nodding while Claire was speaking. What is your feeling immediately?
So yeah, so I think there's a few things here. First of all, I think we are lacking. Is it working? Yeah. All right. And so first of all, I think we should be very aware that we have a lot of focus upon the technology, and we have very little focus on people. And I think we should be very aware that all this technology that we're pushing out should be used by someone in the end. And this change management is probably going to be even more costly than the actual technology stack. And I think we should have a little more focus on that part as well. Also, I think what Claire also mentioned, who is to pay for this in the end? Is it the consumer? Is it the TSO, the DSO, or the community as a whole? And I think we need to be a bit more aware of some of the costs of implementing this kind of technology.
Thank you very much, Jens. One question to Francesco Bonfiglio, CEO of Gaia-X. Maybe one word about Gaia-X before replying my question, and the same applies to Uri Hale of Feeware. But the question is, what brought the two of you invest heavily, because it was quite an investment what you made in the digitalization outlook of the energy sector. Please.
Well, one word of on Gaia-X, you asked me, so thank you for inviting me. And Gaia-X, in a nutshell, is trying to give a concrete translation of the so much abused, I should say, word or two words of digital sovereignty. But that's something that would require itself a day or two of debate. But basically what we are trying to do is to respond to the main question, which connects to the question you were asking. What do we need? The answer that we believe is the right one is that the problem is not in the lack of technology, not even in the power of technology. Basically, you can do whatever you want with existing technology. The combination of cloud, artificial intelligence, and the Internet of Everything. Basically, with these three ingredients, you can cook whatever you want. The problem is why sectors like energy, but any sector in reality, are not riding onto the wave of technology. And the answer is very simple. It's a lack of trust. So in other words, we are reaching the tipping point, or we are hitting the roof, because we have the maximum availability of technology and the lowest level of trust. Trust in what? Trust in making sure that those technologies are controllable, transparent, and interoperable, without which no way to build data economy. And as well, they respond to, let me say, they comply with the regulation, which is increasing like entropy. But on the other side, it faces a limited capability by providers to comply with something that sometimes is not fully clear, and for users to understand whether that technology really complies to the regulation. So this is creating a big installation, a big deadlock that, as a fact, produces a very low level of uptake of cloud. Cloud per se is not data economy, but it's the street where you run the data. Now, the level of uptake of cloud in Europe is below 26%, which means 80% of our applications data are still legacy on premises. And this applies to the energy sector. So without making a mind shift, and the mind shift is triggered by trust, nothing will happen in a real move to digital economy, because digital economy is not digitalization or digitization. It's a complete re-engineering of processes, business models, economical models, in a competitive model. So putting together, let me say, actors that in nature are competitors to build in a cooperative model something completely new to digitize the value chains. And I think this is what Max pointed out earlier in the presentation, and I totally agree.
Thank you very much, Francesco. And your view, Ulrich Halle?
Yeah, first, thank you very much for inviting me here, and a few words on Feeware. Feeware has been created starting 10 years ago in a public-private partnership of the European Commission with a lot of European companies and research organizations. It was called the Future Internet PPP, and the result of it is, on the one side, the Feeware Foundation, which I'm heading, but on the other hand, open source technology and open standards, which were started to be used in smart cities. And in the meantime, 5R is the globally leading open source technology for the digitization of cities and regions. Far more than 300 cities in over 30 countries are creating their smart city, doing their digitization based on 5R technology. But we are also starting to address the domains of smart water and also smart energy. So we have an architecture for the digitization of the grid to create a smart grid. And with this, let me comment a bit on what Max said. And I think I saw he just left the room or had to leave the room. And what we see here on the radar, we see here topics like digital twin, like AI, like IoT, like platforms. And I'm living in Germany, even in a small village in Germany, and we are producing in the meantime 34 times of our own energy consumption by renewable energies. And to be able to manage this, we need data. Need data describing what's happening around us. We need platforms to bring all the players onto one platform, means the TSO, the DSO, the aggregators, which are more and more being in the game, and the consumers, which are more and more becoming producers also. So therefore we call them prosumers. For example, in the little village where I'm living, more than 1/3 of the houses have solar panels on the roof. And to manage all this and to avoid that, like we do have it in summer when the sun is shining, and especially on the weekends when not a lot of industry is running and consuming energy, our windmills have to be stopped because the energy can't be transported. And if we are now in a position to, for example, load our electric vehicles only when sufficient renewable energy is available, so when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, and we don't need to transport it somewhere else, then we have done a first step on managing such networks which are using renewable energy. And I think we are not too far away from this, but for this, to enable it, we need interoperability of systems, we need trust, we need security, as Francesco mentioned before, but also we need the ability to interoperate between different systems. We need what is called sector coupling, and here we still have a way to go, but I think we have a lot of ingredients in our hand to make it reality. And maybe we will have a chance a bit later to talk about our joint endeavor between Gaia-X, 5R, and a few others in the Data Spaces Business Alliance to make this really reality, and our role in the Data Spaces Support Center, which is providing these guidelines.
So thank you very much for this, and especially we shall not miss that opportunity. I have a question for Claire, and then we have a quick look at the questions coming from the online world. Claire, how can we accelerate the green and digital transformation and become more resilient in times of crisis, and have it from the point of view of one of the largest distributors in Europe? That is a wide question, but I'm sure that you have a very concise reply for that.
I will try. Okay. So first, I would like to come back on why it is complex to transform following or to use the digitalization. My feeling is actually that the digitalization is not a process. And usually when you look at the implementation, when you go through this digitalization, it is usually cross the different good old industrial processes. And one of the difficulties, I guess, is really to think on how to rethought or to rethink our processes in order to be efficient when we want to use the digitalization. For instance, let me give you an example. If you have deployed some smart meters then this kind of data can be used, of course, for all the markets, but also for yourself in order to have a better observability of your low voltage grid, for instance. But by saying this, actually, inside my company, this means that you are looking at two different processes. One, which is how are you going to make your grid running? And the other one, which is how are you going to facilitate the market? And a lot of digital transformation goes through different good old industrial processes in our company. So I think that we really have to think differently in our organization in order to really get the maximum of value from the digital. And then there are some additional reasons why it is complex. So the lifetime in the digital is basically 5 years. Lifetime in a grid is 50 years. So you have a shift in your mindset when you want to mix digitals and items from the grid. You really have to change the way you think. And this, in the very large company, it's not so easy to really integrate the fact that when we are using digital technology, then it's basically 4 or 5 years. And then you have to rebuild and rebuild and so. So I guess there are many different reasons, and not only the trust. Trust is one of the reasons, but there are very operational reasons which can explain why it's so hard. Now, on basically the question of the resiliency, I guess one of the main challenges that we have is to make the medium voltage and the low voltage grid in a better shape to be observable. The fact is that we have more and more solar and wind power in this part of the grid, and the fact is that to be at the same time green and resilient, we need to be able to have a lot of different kind of sensors in this especially part of the grid. And the fact is that because of the story, the way they have been built, this part of the grid is clearly not at the right level of observability. And it's a huge digital project, because for doing this, you need to define which kind of data you want to get. So that means that you have to define which kind of use case you are going to face. You need to define where you are going to put your different sensors. You have to be sure that all your IoT organization is secured. So cyber security is really an issue. You need to have a very fast communication. So ICT is key. And also you need to have some ways to analyze this data. So you need to have data analytics tools, optimization, different kind of algorithm. And of course, you need to do all of this for user. So for us, I guess the main issue within the next, I guess, 5 to 10 years, it's really to improve the observability of the low voltage grid. And this is clearly one of the main conditions that we have to fulfill in order to be more resilient in this environment where we have more wind and more solar in a very large scale.
Thank you very much, Claire. I've seen Vincenzo Berruto taking notes all the way down while you were talking. And this can be seen as promising, or the contrary. It depends, but the observability of the distribution grid is certainly something that you pinned on your notebook over there. Jens, one item has been brought quite clearly by Claire with well, a prudent delicacy being part of such a big organization like ENER-DG, which is the topic of resistance. Your experience, the strongest resistance of the DSOs and other similar organizations in going boldly into the digitalization process. Do they wait for the constriction to be there, or they are ready and mature enough to act without particular stimuli?
I think it depends on the organization. So some DSOs are also, so in Denmark, large enough to look ahead. They can see what's happening out there, and they can see that they need to invest significantly in smart metering. We have the first generation of smart meters throughout all households and all producers and consumers of energy. So, and we have that for a couple of years now. So we can start to see what actually happens when we roll that technology out. We can see that the market for energy savings, similar to what you propose, is starting to rise. We can see that we can start to actually make flexible energy consumption on a small scale at this point. We can see that all these new technology is starting to be adapted slowly, though. One of the issues that we have in Denmark is that we are not targeting 100% carbon free. We are targeting 100% renewable, which is even more challenging, meaning that we are actually very concerned about the weather. What is the weather going to be like? And the issue is that a weather belt is around 500 kilometers wide. That's the length of Denmark, meaning that in theory, we can have a day or two where we wouldn't have wind or sun, meaning that, well, we can't produce energy. Therefore, we would need strategic partnerships to actually both store and import energy. So we're looking to some of those challenges and figuring out how we can do microgrids even earlier than your timeline up there. We would need microgrids in 5 to 7 years in order to actually have and operate the grid that we have currently. We can't wait for this technology to mature. We need it. Our government has set the goal that we would need to go 100% renewable by 2030. What that means, well, we will probably need to close all the power plants. And we will actually need this digital technology on top of our current system to actually operate it. We would need to be able to act within approximately 10 milliseconds to do microtransactions, to do microbalancing. That's the issue that we're looking for. We can't wait for projects to arise. We would need to construct it now. And we would personally, our organization would start constructing this technology next year. We can't wait for projects to be forefronters. We need it.
Thank you very much. So this is quite a blow to the resistance of those still resisting. And what is for you, Ulrich, and also Francesco, the impediment to imagine a strategic capability plan or capacity plan to master the first steps of the real transition and going to the direction that was described by Jens, that will complement the existing world there.
Yeah, maybe I can start.
In a nutshell, because I know that this might be also very much wide as a topic.
Okay, let me start. Max showed a slide before with the Digital Act, the Digital Governance Act in the center, the IPSE on the left side, and the Data Spaces Support Center on the right side. And together with Gaia-X, we are working here in this Data Spaces Support Center to define the frame condition for the creation of interoperable building blocks. We are working on a joint architecture for these platforms, and we are working on the building blocks which will fill this architecture, reusing a lot of what was also showed here of the OpenDI project, which was just finished and created a lot of these building blocks. Building block means functionalities for interoperability, so standard APIs, standard data models. It provides functionalities for the data sovereignty, not only security, but really data sovereignty, and also functionalities for the data monetization, because this will be very important for the sustainability of data platforms to come also up with this functionality to monetize data and to create value out of data. To give you an example in the energy domain, and coming back to the example I mentioned before, with electric cars, which have the ability for bidirectional charging, so to charge back energy from the car into the net. And if we have dynamic pricing, so if I can charge my car when sufficient wind is there or sufficient sun is there, and pay 10 cents per kilowatt hour, and if the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing, but my battery is full in the car, and I can sell it back to the grid for 30 cents, then I will be more than willing to do so and provide my electric vehicle as a part of a microgrid stabilizing this grid. And we are working in the Data Spaces Support Center to enable this. And we will also work very close together with the smart energy data spaces activities, which are running in parallel to this.
Thank you. This obviously must become the general habit. We have some successful use cases for this kind of exchange of vehicle to grid and grid to vehicle already, as you know. But the way you depicted it, it implies also a lot of artificial intelligence and the digitalization to be managed. In a nutshell, as well, for you, Francesco, what is your view? Then we select one question from the online and one question from the public here, and we move on. Please, Francesco.
Yeah, I'll try to be as short as I can. So following up on Jens, I totally believe that speed is a must, but we also need to learn how to plan in advance and not react to tragedies or let me say wars. Let's be honest. I mean, the acceleration here is coming also because of a very well-known event and the acceleration due by the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent crisis. So first of all, we need to plan in advance. Second, we need to be concrete. And to me, concreteness means projects and reuse of existing technologies and standards. As Ulrich said, we are combining the efforts of FIWARE, GaiaX, E.DSO, BDBA, and other associations to avoid that these associations simply keep going preaching about theoretical things and put together a reusable set of assets and a framework to help organization moving into the creation of common data space. Third element, we need to lead by example. And I want to explain how GaiaX works here. We have two objectives. On one side, we are enabling the creation of common data spaces in several domains. And on the other side, we are defining the rules and implementing a software framework to ensure transparency, controllability, and interoperability of services, because that's the core. I keep repeating my my mantra: trust. Without trust, there's not going to be any data economy. Then we can talk about modernization, value exchange, etc. But without trust in technologies, nothing will be exchanged. And I can make an example. Everybody in the room knows about the smart metering, how long it took to be effective because of regulation and because of the difficulty to overcome the trust of people or getting access to the information of people. So there can be many examples that tell us that technology and business are separated. What we did at GaiaX, we have several working groups. We have one dedicated to energy, which is led by Martin Gourier from EDF, 60 people from 10 countries that have developed already in April 21 a position paper with 25 use cases, out of which 3 projects were selected by the European Commission for a tender dedicated to research projects on energy because of their alignment to this position paper that was produced by these members and to the Gaia-X architecture. Why is that? Because we are grouping representatives of the market. We are representing the voice of the market. And this is extremely powerful, putting together the effort of and the knowledge of people that are really doing energy production, distribution in the market is the only way to build successful use cases. And the consortium of these people to create real projects is the fast way to lead by example. This is the way Gaia-X is deployed in the market, and energy is one of the most successful verticals where we are actually leading by example with our projects.
Thank you very much, Francesco. Very, very clear. I wanted to thank all of the panelists here, and James and Claire and Ulrich and Francesco once again. And maybe we take one question from the online. Who is selecting them? Zeni, maybe you can indicate a question and put it to our panelists. Do you have visibility on the questions that we have there? There are 3 questions in the Q&A and 3 comments in the chat, but maybe those are services. Those are service. 1 second. And the other request was possibly 1 question from the public in presence here. First come, first served. I'm sure that there is a question because I heard a comment. Please. Check.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Bridget Cosgrave, and I'm European Affairs Advisor to Sopra Steria, the French publicly quoted IT services vendor, provider of cloud services together with OVH. I would like to ask the 4 panelists, what is the metric of what your organization wants to achieve in the next 24 months? If you could give us an OKR or a KPI in the next 24 months. And just to put this in context, in a personal capacity, I was a national partner of Sigfox, the French IoT company that burned 360 million euros of investor money over a period of 10 years. In my own case, I burned quite a lot of my own money in Poland, trying to deploy all the use cases that you have reference to in the specific domain of IoT. And frankly, I'm a little bit jaded on the timeline, but just to help the audience understand, next 24 months, 1 to 3 KPIs that your organization is actually hoping to deliver.
Thank you very much, Bridget. A very challenging question.
I'll give it a start if you allow
really me. Monosyllables as a reply. Thank you.
That's why I want to give it a start, because I have monosyllables. First of all, we're not burning any taxpayer money and no investment money, but we are relying on our members. We have 360 members, which represent users and providers of technology in more than 25 countries. So they are the most effective way to adopt the standards that we are developing in the market, because if they don't like it or they don't see a benefit, they simply would not do it. Second, if we achieve 50% of our members using or requesting for Gaia-X compliant services, this is going to be a U-turn in the European market, and it's going to be one of KPI. Third, the number of projects, the number of data spaces deployed, and the number of services compliant to Gaia-X that will be published starting from January 2023 would be my key KPI to measure the success of our initiative.
Good.
For this,
I was too fast, possibly.
Claire, you have the floor.
For the time being, for the for ENER-DGs, for instance, the main KPI within the next 12 months, 6 months, 12 months, probably again 24 months, is really to optimize the time to market on the connection. We have a lot of requests for connection on the grid. And the key issue is to make the business and to really speed up the way we connect all the customers to the grid.
Which appears to be one of the main problems that the DSOs must face in Europe these days. So, please, Jens.
So I have to agree with Lea. So having solar panels connected to the grid in Denmark takes 6 years at this point. That we can't live with. We need to do something about that. And one of the projects that we're running at the moment will have that time. But we need to probably go even further. That's one of them. Then we will also need to look into EVs, electric vehicles. One of the things I want to emphasize here is that we have another player which hasn't been mentioned in electric vehicles, which is tax. That tax deductions on electricity used for electric vehicles in Denmark. And I don't think we are alone here. So I think we need to have that pointer in as an integrator as well. Yeah, I think that's our main goal.
I was giving a smiling nod to the Finnish regulator over there representing said that we shall have on the next panel, because when you mentioned that he had a shiver and say, no, Jesus, we come to money right now. And yes, the other question was before beginning this, is the money already on the table, or are we looking for the money? Both ways. We shall be always looking for the money for the right investments, but the money is already on the table for the good investments. So it is very much in the hands of the proposals of the market and the DSOs in one way, and from the other side is very much in the ability of the institution, DG CONNECT, DG Energy, to propose a legislation that follows the evolution of the industry and stimulates the evolution of the industry. Ulrich and Francesco Francesco, you already were there. Ulrich, your opinion on the question that has been posed.
Yeah, that's for us. It's quite simple. I mentioned before, actually 300 cities. Our target is to bring this within the next 24 months to 1,000 cities in at least 50 countries, providing or driving their digitization based on fiber technology. That's one. And the second one, together with our partners, to provide what GSM is for the mobile communication. So due to GSM, you can use your smartphone in Japan, in Australia, in America, and in Europe, and wherever you are in the world. And our target is to develop and to provide the GSM for the data management and the data economy of the future. So to provide the standards for the interoperability of data spaces within different domains, energy, mobility, smart city, and so on, because these data spaces need to be able to exchange data and to work together. And that's the mission we are driving.
Thank you very much, Ulrich. Jens, I'm putting a little bit of pressures because we're running a little bit long.
So just a quick comment. In Denmark, we already have that kind of technology. We have a centralized unit for all the smart meters, and then you can virtually have a power supplier or using various DSO grids. So we have such a technology already, but we obviously need to expand it to other domains and other integrations.
Thank you very much. Atseni, do we have the question from the online public?
Sorry for a delay. We have selected a question coming from online world. As you mentioned, Roberto Vitalio Prisco. She put forward the following question. Do you consider to look at Ukrainian grid as possible pilot project, microgrid, LV, self-healing, for example?
Engaging question. Is the reconstruction of the Ukrainian grid going to be a training ground or a testing ground, sorry for the crudeness of the exposition, for the modernization of the whole of the grid in Europe? Question mark, yes or no? Claire?
Yeah, sorry, I did not hear the question. Sorry, I was.
Yes, the question is the reconstruction of the Ukrainian grid, when it will be the moment, to be considered as the training ground for improving the grids in the whole of Europe and to fully modernize the electric system?
I don't know. I probably, yes. I mean, as far as I restart from the beginning, then you can build something completely new and completely up to date to the digitalization that you need, basically. So I have no conviction on that. But as soon as you rebuild, you can really be up to the state of the art.
Thank you very much, Francesco.
Yes, of course. I was laughing because we should not use Ukraine as a proof of concept, of course. Exactly. But the matter is that we have all suffered, and we have seen how in a few months we discovered the need to build a common plan for a shared stock of gas. We could have done that before if we had data exchange across the different countries. We realized that we need to balance more the usage of nuclear energies, reopening centrals that were turned off. We could have done that better and earlier if we knew in advance. The same applies to carbon and of course to renewable energy. So I think the war, first of all, has to end, regardless of energy and any other discussion. And the reconstruction is going to be an opportunity for the Ukraine, first of all. But I hope the lesson learned will drive us in the right direction to build it right first, and of course build it not just for Ukraine, but for Europe as well in a shared model.
Thank you very much for this. E.DSO is very much engaged in supporting our Ukrainian members in facing the situation, and we know very well that that what you say is what is necessary. First has to finish, and then it's the country, and then it's the grid. And Ulrich, and then Jens.
Yeah, I can only underline what Claire said Claire, what you said in your first intervention, that in the energy domain, we have infrastructure which is used partly for 30 or even 40 years. And to digitize this or to retrofit it is not that easy. Ukraine, as 50% of this infrastructure is simply destroyed and needs to be rebuilt, there is a big chance to do it much more digital and using actual technologies. But the question is whether there would be sufficient suppliers which already have this know-how how to do it, and whether it can be done in the required short time frame in which the infrastructure in the Ukraine needs to be rebuilt and built up again. So there is a high potential, but it is also a high risk that traditional infrastructure will need to be rebuilt given the time frame.
Thank you very much, Jens. Your closure?
I think I have to agree with both Ulrich and Claire that there's a huge opportunity to go closer to state of the art when you have to rebuild a lot of these things. On the other hand, I think it's a political decision that someone has to pay for this. And probably we need, as a European Union, to take responsibility to reconstruct this infrastructure as a whole.
Thank you very much. I will not engage the Commission on this because it is not the role of our friend here to react on this, but I'm sure that among his notes there is also this element. There is a readiness and there is a consciousness here. And thank you very much for remembering it. We pointed out in all our meetings with DG Energy and the Simpson cabinet, but this needs to be restated and restated to bit. Thank you very much for your participation. May I ask for an applause to our panelists here? No, you can carry on. There is a return of the signal, but I.
Okay. Analyzing the digital energy action plan. Analyzing the digital energy action plan. And going back to the Ds of energy, one that really stands out here and that deserves recognition as a significant step forward in terms of policy is democratization. So that is one that I would focus on because it is a way to empower citizens and to allow for more benefits through positive market competition and leveraging cutting edge technology. So the document mentions the word interoperability or interoperable 27 times. And the document also says that the EU will support wherever possible open source technology. This is a very important step forward in data democratization. Secondly, recognizing this achievement, I would like to challenge the policymakers coming from the tech side and the implementation side to possibly consider doing even more, so setting the milestones even higher. So for example, the document talks about the common European energy data space, but it says that there would be a coordinated framework for data sharing. And what is missing here and what the tech can provide to make it truly common is a registry of energy assets, giving each asset a decentralized ID using cutting-edge technology, in this case, blockchain, among others, to enable the example from the previous panel, the battery, to be effectively used as vehicle to grid flexibility provider and any other asset, or to turn to the consumer app, which is fostered by this document. It could be a lot more than just saving costs. It could be a lot more than just reducing consumption in demand response to help the grid. It could also be about an energy individual being more active participant on the market, gaining more revenue and wanting to invest more in renewables to optimize their experience as an energy market participant. So in that area, I would welcome if the policymakers would consider more than an experimental platform for energy communities, since we have already had multiple experiments, many of these funded by the European Union Horizon projects. And what we would like to see is the policymakers also putting together guidelines and KPIs, what needs to be reached by these pilots to go mainstream and to implement fully the possibilities that are there for energy communities in the framework of the Clean Energy Package, which have been implemented to a very limited extent by the member states. So I also want to refer to the radar that was shared from E.DSO, and one technology that I know well there, which is blockchain, should be moved closer to the center. So not in 2030, but already now, because already now in California, we have an app that partly uses blockchain to induce users to relieve congestion from the grid. It's called Flex Alert. Already now, there is a decentralized energy asset registry being conceptualized and developed in other markets, namely Australia. So if European Union really wants a common energy data space, it needs to start with this common decentralized energy asset registry, so that the E.DSO-TSO digitization of the grid is not only a digitization of the grid, but a digitization of the market. So making the market smart, just like you renamed the working group from smart grids to smart energy, also making sure that the applications are about smart energy markets and not just smart grids. I'll stop there and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you very much, Anna. That was wide and clear in a way. Juan Martí, control systems in the smart grid global, probably you are one of the most qualified within E.DSO membership. May I ask to fix membership? May I ask to fix? Please mute all the participants because it is all the participants because it is.
Are we good? Do you hear me?
With Juan, his connection is not working, and
so Juan is not hearing us.
I think he's hearing us, but he cannot answer.
Okay, well, Juan, we love you. You missed an opportunity. We missed an opportunity because Iberdrola is one of the most experienced and since a long time experienced in this kind of management. So integrating renewables into the grid, into the distribution grid, and have experience out of that. I hope that we can have him online in the next 5 minutes. Otherwise, my apologies. I could ask another friend here to substitute. It's coming from the same area. No? So it's Luis Cunha from from EREG of Portugal, but is more a regulator and a project manager rather than an operative on the grids. But that is the real point, that this was a good opportunity to have the temperature from a DSO. Let's try to connect him only via audio with another means if possible. Otherwise, sorry, we lost him. VP. So what is the regulatory challenge here? So in this operating a distribution network using distributed energy resources, and what is a realistic role seen from a regulator for the participative consumer, for the prosumer in a way? Do we need an extraordinary network code to envisage some strange relations between DSOs and the prosumers? Or do we imagine a completely free market at the bottom of the grid? What do you have in mind?
Yeah, thank you for the very, very simple question. First of all, I will not try to reply on network code, because that is, of course, our colleagues here who might think on that. But of course, as I think the previous discussion was, Claire was mentioning, the key issue for regulators as DSOs is the connecting new DRS in the market as of course. And you were right when he mentioned 6 years to connect new. This is something that makes me shiver, I have to say that. So I think the situation that is different in different countries, of course, and the situation could be better in other places. But of course, the role of the DSO is perhaps the key element here as well. We need, usually DSO is the data manager who will provide the data for the stakeholders, consumers, and perhaps we need a DSO app as well. As mentioned, the DSOs need to have access to information to be able to locate flexibility and utilize that in their work as well.
I see. And are you confident that the prosumer, the consumer, the actor of the energy transition at the last stage will be ready or available enough in terms of readiness to really participate into the market? Or do you see that there will emerge other intermediaries, or let's say service figures to help that kind of consumer and then widen again the complexity? Because this is something that is also reckoned for in when you look forward and you try to imagine what is going to happen.
Yes, first of all, of course, as we know, there's a lot of new prosumers coming up and connecting to the network as well. So in that sense, there are schemes, national schemes at least, to help these prosumers to come to and connecting to the market as well. Of course, we have to remember that there are some consumers which don't have the ability. Of course, we'll talk about energy microgrids and energy communities, which would enable more consumers to participate in this work. But of course, we have to remember the data is key element to all. We had couple of webinars year back to 21. Time is going so fast now. But of course, we continue to work within the CER on the data issue as well. And we're trying to locate the data which is needed to enhance the flexibility markets. Of course, we know there are pilots going on interface, OneNet, and we already know the Piccolo and others operating. But we have to make sure that the information is there for everyone to be able to participate in the market.
The strongest or the most important technological challenge that you see ahead to couple the need of the consumer with a regulatory approach for this? I know it's a nasty question.
It is, thank you. I would say, of course, we always talk about smart meters. Smart meters will enable, there's a rollout of 2.0 going on in some parts of Europe already. So that would eventually help. But of course, I've been listening to our smart colleagues, which claim that there could be other technical solutions to enhance this. So smart meter is perhaps the obvious way to do it, but perhaps there are other possibilities as well.
Yes, we know that there was a directive stating 80% the penetration of smart grids into the system by a deadline that has already passed and is over. Do you think that we shall possibly achieve a 90–95%, let's say at the end of the decade? Or what is the expectation? It's up to the institution to enforce a little bit this, because we know that there are countries that do not envisage to have smart meters for all the consumers, etc.
Yes, I think for the current situation we are in the crisis in Europe, and so I think smart meters are not perhaps the first thing in mind for the moment. But after hopefully this crisis will end, so we will of course start to discuss that further. The timeline is of course demanding here as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I have seen that Juan Martí is joining on audio only. Is that correct, Juan Martí? Are you there? Calling for Mr. Rodriguez. Is not there. Okay, good. So I'm sorry again. I have seen in the chat with my right eye that he said audio only, but probably it is not all that true.
Hello. Is it working? Hello.
Okay. Can you hear us well? Because we hearing you correctly. Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I presented you before, Martí, as the member of a company that is very much experienced in managing distributed energy resources and integrating them into the distribution grid. And I wanted exactly to ask you to what extent this challenge is managed by the Iberdrola Group in this moment, and how the grid observability and the use of flexibility will change your need in digitalization over the next years.
Okay, so first, thank you for letting me in. The thing is, we are present regarding distribution networks in 4 different countries. Which this is Spain, the UK, the US, and Brazil, and we have completely different levels of maturity in the different countries and different challenges. I will speak mostly about Spain, which now is where I am working in, and the first challenge is going from prototypes pilot solutions to industrial solutions. One of the big challenges is that the distribution network is really very big, and the lower the voltage level, the bigger it is, because just one single line segment in very high voltage accounts for one segment, and in low voltage is again one segment, and you multiply the number of objects by millions. So digitalization is key to understand the network model, the grid, And for sure, one very, very important thing is observability. So we could have strong forecasting of the load and the production in the network. However, we have daily incidents, the network, the topology changes, and you need to know what the consumers are consuming or the producers are producing, the generators. So it is observability is really critical, because we are assuming that we have now to deal with different flows, different capacities, and this is the big challenge, industrialization of the solutions.
Thank you very much. And I wanted to ask you a single word answer to this, Juan Martí. How much is a big company ready to, or better, you cannot have a figure in mind, and you are not probably entitled to comment on that. But do you think that the big companies like yours and the big champions in Europe must be also an active part in inducing the prosumer to look at possible investments into the self-production and self-consumption? Or should they encourage their customer, or should they be passive in this respect? Because this, no, I'm also going to ask Anna and VP after this. So
no, we are investing a lot in Iberdrola, because we understand the consumers and the producers are going to be active players. So we need to catch with the right tools to have the technology to be able to plan and to operate this new environment. And we are on the run to get ready to face any situation where we are absolutely sure the customers are not going to be passive customers anymore, and we need to be ready to handle them, keeping for sure the safety and the quality of supply, which is a must. But really, we are investing a lot in being prepared.
Thank you very much. So your opinion on this, Anna?
Yes, well, it depends on the application, but for many cases, the technology is already there, which is what I would like to argue. And often utilities like Iberdrola or energy communities look up to regulators to allow them to do more. So for example, if there is going to be this energy asset registry that I discussed, there has to be a consensus that this is the way to go. Otherwise, we will stay in different silos and have centralized registries per country and have a lower ambition. Or in the case of energy communities, in some places in the European Union, they have been allowed to trade within the community, but at a set price, not market driven, and often are not allowed to trade between communities. So there is a limited scope where they can interact with the market and benefit from the clean energy package, which is arguably more ambitious than the implementation by member states. So we keep asking for KPIs. You know, what do you want us to demonstrate so that the policymakers are comfortable in using the technology that is available to allow consumers to participate more actively and benefit more from the resources that they have.
Thank you. Very optimistic view, and which I personally share. And that is quite interesting. And Veli-Pekka, what is your feeling there? Are we going towards converging or a meeting where regulators, service providers, and DSO might converge and agree on some further steps to undertake in this direction?
Yes, I perhaps start with the clean energy package. So there was a clear legislation that we need to have a network development plans from the DSOs as well. So I think that's the good starting point. We will collect the information from the DSOs, their demands, their needs for flexibility. Some of our NRAs have already implemented that the flexibility should be part of the work. Of course, we realize that might take a couple of years to sort of kick off rightly, and perhaps we will have the marketplaces. Of course, as I mentioned, we will continue the discussions with the stakeholders with our zero coming paper as well. So that will be continuous as well. But of course, I will encourage prosumers to be active, because DSOs now have mandate to purchase flexibility, for example. So that's one to be in mind.
Thank you very much about that, and thank you very much to our panelists there. We shall take the questions after the next couple of sections, because they will be that there will be a more complete framework, and maybe we can summarize in a couple of questions something more. Thank you very much for having taken part in this. I would like to remind that the recording of this workshop here will be available on our website, and that in the next several weeks we shall ask all of our panelists, at least those that will be in agreement with that, if they want to go more in depth of what they told us this afternoon via a podcast or a videocast to be offered on our website as well for the eternity. So thank you very much, and thank you for your contribution on this. And now I would like to call Lawrence Ernalsten, project manager of CNECT, whom is here. Dirk Kostrop, manager of the Department Materials and Methods of Fluvius. Thank you very much. And Gianluca Lipari from EPRI, probably online. No, is there? Okay, bye. And thank you very much for the participation. I just saw the note on my script a little bit later, but I would like to pass the microphone and the role, and with my apologies, to Svetoslav Mikhailov from DG CONNECT, whom is much better qualified than me to develop the need of standards, because I gave, you have seen this, a rather creative approach. So, but do we really need the standards? I think that probably we need a good mix of rigidity, but also openness to what is coming anew. Please.
Absolutely, yes. And I've been involved in so much in standardization that, of course, I have my own opinion, but we're here to hear the panel participants, which when I looked through they were presented with their titles, but when I looked through their short bios, they're all focused on R&D, they're all focused on ICT, digitalization of energy, these kind of things, AI, and so on. So they have kind of similar profiles, but working in three different, very distinct areas. And we already started, but maybe in the same spirit, we can hear from the other two participants. What about interoperability? Do we need for the digital transition, for the digitalization of energy? And are standards needed to achieve this interoperability?
Okay, then, yeah, maybe I will go next, the power now. Yeah, I fully agree with what Lawrence was saying. And I'm also in favor of, yeah, standards are needed. But there is the keyword that came out a lot today about interoperability, and that's an important step. also because we heard today, we are talking about digitalization, we're talking about merging together different sectors. Also, we did talk about putting together or working together in different data spaces. And that's what is needed when we talk about different sectors, different experience backgrounds, also way to look at things that need to be to work together, especially in the energy sector, where, for example, many in the future, even more services or building blocks will rely on different data sources, heterogeneous data sources, coming from many different areas and different and various actors. So interoperability is the key to enable the full digitalization of the energy sector together, hand in hand with the, we mentioned e-mobility, we mentioned buildings, we mentioned customers and empowering customers and citizens. So that's a key key topic to look into and to always keep in mind when thinking about standards that can be and should be also a way to ensure this interoperability, or keep that in mind, but also at whatever type of applications and whatever type of data will be used in the different applications and building blocks that are coming in the future. So interoperability is, will be, and is already a central topic to be always addressed when we talk about data and digitalization, from my point of view.
Thanks. And then DSO opinion?
Yes, I can only agree from the point of view from DSO that interoperability is really, really very important. View the fact that when we put components on the grid, they are there for decades. It means also that if we have to replace them, if there are some evolutions, even we do want that the digital chain of that communication of components still works, which means also we do not want a vendor lock-in. That's why interoperability is really important. And it is important for the complete system, because you can see actually, let's say, three aspects on it. You've got the components which are communicating, you've got the data capturing, let's say, and then you've got the central systems with all kind of interfaces, and then you got the application of the data, getting the data out from those interfaces, out of those databases. Each of those three have their own need towards standards, towards standardization, to be able that the data is used on the correct way. And even more, to my opinion, standardization is not enough. Standardization is only a necessity for everything you use. But on top of that, we would like to have a certification that even with the components that you're using, that you know what you really have there. And that certification has to take everything into account. Triggers, timeouts, use cases, everything. So that in that way, you know what you are putting on the grid, and you know that it is working. And if you replace it with something else, that you still know it keeps on working, and that you don't have to reiterate, refigure it. It's otherwise you end up with a grid with a mess of components.
Maybe just an add-on question: who is supposed to do this certification? I mean, who do you expect to do it?
Well, I think that's a good opportunity for lots of companies. There are companies who are already busy in that kind of area. You have, if I mention them, DNVGL, but you've got also other companies who could use standardization as some kind of commercial way of doing business, really based on those standards. It can be triggered also by instances like CEN or CNECT, that they do a cooperation with some companies, but it is really something that the industry could take. And of course, it should be an independent company, not a supplier itself, because otherwise it would be a self-certification which is probably not the best way to do a certification.
Some other sectors are doing it, but indeed, it's not a super good way. So maybe kind of the next round would be, what are the gaps within the standardization that we have to ensure interoperability? And what are the barriers for the adoption of these standards or for the further evolution? Yeah, start again.
Some gaps, yeah, of course. Certification is for me a large gap. On the other hand, also, sometimes there are too many standards. So which one do you have to take? And there, I think, regulation can be a good way to say this is the way how you have to handle it, how you have to force it in towards some kind of standardization on top of the standardization. So it's really it helps then also DSO to make the right choice between everything that is available.
So the gap is too much, too many standards.
I will disagree. Interesting. While I do think there are too many standards in some instances, I think data standardization, which is an extremely important and relevant topic, is still lacking in some parts. From the CNECT perspective, I know that there is standardization per sector. So there is per sector really this isolated vertical standardization. But I think a high overarching data standardization approach, which is very daunting and dangerous of me to say, but I think there needs to be some more push on this, on data in general and how we can look at this. The Gaia-X person from the previous round would have loved this question, I guess. So I think there we can still do it from a more general view, and this is much broader than energy, and this is a perspective, as you said, I also work with things like AI and cybersecurity and others, and I think data as a general good might deserve a general approach, with then supplemented vertical standards for specific sectors. The way to get these standards adopted by the industry, I think, is by having the industry involved. And again, I will say industry, but there is so much more to standardization. It is the industry, but it is small and medium enterprises, is that the consumers should be involved. I think so many stakeholders that might be overlooked need to be involved. And I think for the uptake of a standard to really be high and for the standard to succeed, I think this can only happen if you truly get everyone involved from the beginning and during the entire development of the standard.
Yeah, maybe just to follow up only for you, and then we'll continue with Gianluca for the gaps. You're talking about the verticals for the standardization. That's Sense and Elec. If you look at ETSI, for example, it's digital only, which in our use case here is horizontal. What will be the relation with ETSI? And in their view is horizontal. You have energy-related standards and so on, I mean, mobility, and because from our point of view, we're staying at the Commission, we have the two standards organizations. How do we deal? Like, for example, if you look at the SAREF standard, it was developed kind of together. It's in ETSI now, but Sense and Elec was quite active in it as well. How do we manage these kind of situations?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. Sense and Elec and ETSI, 3 organizations officially. So we do, in some parts, there are sometimes overlaps with ETSI. This happens, but we do coordinate with them and try to make sure that there are no overlaps. Also, there are many ETSI people as observer participating in Sense and Elec meetings and vice versa. So this really ensures that we don't get an overlap. It sometimes happens, but then we are alerted of this and we reach out to them or they reach out to us, and we try to make sure that this doesn't happen. But actually, we can also work together, which is even better. You can say, so for example, on smart grids, we have a Sense, CNECT, and ETSI, so the 3 official European standardization organizations. We have a coordination group, which has done a lot of work, which has really pushed the European work on standardization for smart grids to a higher level. It has uptake all around the world. It has really worldwide adoption. And I think this is something that really works and can be used as well. So CNECT and ETSI, we really ensure that we don't overlap. And in cases where this becomes difficult, because there might be topics that are telecommunications, which is a specialization of ETSI, and then, for example, electrotechnical things, which is CNECT, then we try to work together, or separate it and make sure that it works, but we'd send observers to the other organizations. So I think this works really well. And anyone more interested, I would direct them to the website before I start boring everyone with the procedural aspects of standardization.
Maybe we continue with Jean-Luc for the gaps and the barriers and this kind of things. Maybe I will take over at the very last part of the introduction. I agree that involving all the is it's key for making standards being adopted, being also agreed upon with a large audience and then growing set of involved stakeholders, and making them really useful and boosting innovation rather than being somehow a cage or fixing some borders that maybe could be a burden more than helping innovation in this case, for example, digitalization. So the right moment and the right people have to be considered and be there when thinking about innovation and standards. So maybe when you're talking about involvement of stakeholders, we have had, from the Commission point of view, a number of initiatives to do these things, sometimes study, again, for the side of methodology we created a study. Then we have projects that are dealing with these things. They test and pilot standards, and sometimes they also produce, they contribute to the standard organization. You're yourself in the Internet project. And before that, I think you had a view also on Interconnect, on the OpenDAI was mentioned. It's all about standards as well. So these kind of things. In the digital program, we have the data spaces, and this European app for the energy. It's also in the CEF, we have the operational digital platforms, as Max mentioned, which another. So all these kind of projects with the different programs that we have, how do you see their contribution for what you're saying, putting the stakeholders together and then contributing?
Yeah, maybe I can talk directly from involved part in Internet, which has indeed interoperability as its core. And the scope there is, first of all, to try to collect and understand what's going on. That's the very first part of the project. So you mentioned many activities that are indeed ongoing or completed. So that's the very first part, first step. But then it's also about, for example, being able to provide the stakeholders with tools to, for example, in Internet case, assess their interoperability maturity. So being able to identify or assess to which extent with respect to the relevant categories, can be security, can be specific type of data or specific type of application, understand where they stand in terms of interoperability terms, and identify what are the gaps. What are the gaps that needs to be filled to be able to provide, for example, the service that they intend to provide on the market, in terms of being compatible with the interoperability, let's say, guidelines or with standards. So being able of, from the service provider's perspective, understand what are the limits or the indications, and understand where they stand with respect to these categories or these requirements, is a tool, or is something that for sure can help boost the digitalization in the energy sector, as well as we did talk today about different data spaces going to be merged together. So that's also another thing, defining how interoperability between data spaces that are different but have to collaborate, have to coordinate. We saw some use cases today, energy and e-mobility, or for example, in building or customers. So there is the need to provide tools for understanding interoperability requirements and meet those requirements as soon as possible.
And again, this kind of the initiatives of the Commission or the European Union in general to put together stakeholders such as this project that I mentioned, studies, the different programs, Horizon Europe, CEF, DEP, etc. Because sometimes the standards organization has also members participating in the consortium of this initiative. So is it something that is useful, that should be continued, that should be modified in a certain way, or what is its role? What is its effectiveness?
Is it useful to collaborate with other organizations? I think in general, my response would be yes. So I think, of course, sometimes you set up meetings and a lot of talk happens and not that much comes out. But I think especially in this case, it is really important that we do set up this communication between all of consortia, anything, there are many, Horizon, the project you mentioned. I think all of these are very important. You mentioned ETSI earlier. I think it's very important every time we touch on other topics that we really do a broad stakeholder consultation to see, okay, are we forgetting anyone maybe that needs to be involved here in standardization, but in general also. So yeah, I definitely think this is useful and we need to keep doing this, or maybe even do it more.
Maybe also to hear the opinion, and then, because for example, all the same question, but just to say, for example, the Connected Europe facility, what Max said, the operational digital platform, this is for deploying platforms in the field and in connecting DSOs, for example, etc. So would it be something interesting for a DSO to go into?
Well, any kind of project like you mentioned is indeed very important and can be a trigger to realize also some things. And also it is put on a higher level because each DSO, they have to follow their national regulator. If projects are coming from the European Commission, then they have to align somehow with those projects, and that can be beneficial for everybody to work on the same way. And for instance, the API that has been mentioned for the customers, it's a very fine idea, but it will be very difficult to implement it everywhere on the same way with the same tools. I mean, if a customer buys a washing machine and he connects it with on a digital way, he would like that it stays working whatever it takes. And if he has to buy another washing machine after, let's say, 5 years, that he has no lock-in with everything else that he has been consuming by that time. So that's really something that should be taken into account if you try to roll out something on a higher level. How will it work on a longer period? And that is the case with any type of project. And that's also what we are looking into. How can we make sure that things keep on working over a longer time, even with all the fantastic projects that are launched?
Yeah, indeed. The time frame of the appliances is not the same as the time frame of a smartphone or something. Indeed, these kind of things. I guess we're more or less running out of time. For me, it was interesting. One more question, but very quickly, because these are ICT standards. There's in these areas, things are very fast, and then we're going into an area that is much slower in the standardization and development, etc. Is there any clash, and how can this be resolved? An ICT standard can change twice per year or something sometimes. The technology, not the standards, we're still not that fast, but the technology is evolving that kind of way.
Well, that's then, of course, the balance that you have to find between standardization and innovation. And indeed, that innovation, you will always have people who are forerunners try to implement new things with open source software. There's nothing wrong with that, but the moment if they are able to implement it in a way that it fits into a standard, I believe they will have a huge advantage also towards the future.
Maybe we stop here because we're running out of time, but thanks to all the participants. Really nice discussion. Thanks.
Thank you very much, because your approach is Thank you very much. Thank you. So I will not repeat my mistake. So thank you very much, Gianluca, Dirk, and Lawrence. And may I give over the microphone to Carsten Krause from Digital Energy, and he will be moderating the grid edge data, smart in brackets, metering, please.
Thank you, Roberta. I would have left you my moderating place because you've done it so dynamic. So I have to step in your footsteps here. So, but I would like to use the remaining time to ask Laurent. No, it's not. No. Laurent, please. Luis, please. And we have Peter Hermans, who should join us online, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
The topic of the fourth session is on grid edge data and smart metering. We talk about this digital layer of the grid since quite a while, and try to define what are the different elements that bring together these new players and operators on the new decentralized energy system. So we have a lot of electric vehicles, smart homes, smart meters entering it. Looking to my panel, maybe giving Peter the floor first. So what would be in your way the big opportunities and challenges on the path, and what are the most urgent actions that should happen to advance on grid data and smart metering?
Yeah, good afternoon. First sound check. Can you hear me good?
We hear you very well.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, actually, four points, I think, which are most urgently field of action. The first one is, and actually that was also what Claire was referring to in session 1, data for managing and planning the low voltage grids. Actually, the last mile is turning into first mile, and actually use the data which is already out there. Smart meter data from individual smart meters. And for those who are interested in the Netherlands, we achieved that already through an agreement with the Data Protection Authority. Then the second one is load forecasting and predictive load flow analysis in day ahead and intraday timeframes on 15-minute granularity. We talk a lot about flexibility, but if the market really is able to help the DSOs with flexibility, then at least the DSOs should be able to communicate to the market when, where, and what volumes of load need to be reduced, because it's just not a copper plate anymore. So load forecasting and predictive load flow analysis for DSOs on all grid levels are key. Then the third point, it was also in the action plan, cooperation with the TSO on digital twins. As we said, there are many grids, but there's only one system. And jointly working with TSOs on digital twins to accommodate good overall observability and fast, correct, automated exchange when intervening on system level, that's really key. Actually, in 2016, we agreed already that when you intervene on system level, then you should never create a problem for another system operator. So this all requires a good common grid model and a jointly developed algorithms when you intervene on system level. And then the last one, the fourth point, that was also referred already by Anna in session 2, accommodating the emerging local markets by smart data management of smart meters and other meters. And actually the emergence of local markets and how that works with energy communities is really a hot topic today in Europe and in Netherlands. And I think DSO holds really the crown jewels to unlock this value for citizens. So this is really a win-win for DSOs and for energy communities, which they should engage. So that are the 4 points which I would say are the most urgent fields of action here. And as I understand that E.DSO is starting to work on a white paper on their contribution on the action plan, I would expect that these topics show up there.
Yes, thank you, Peter. Laurent, do you agree to the 4 points or any disagreement?
Yeah, I think they have been very well summarized by Peter. What I would like to add is 2 things. First, I think the use case have been very well identified by the digitalization of the energy action plan. So the 3 use cases, bridging sectorial integration is really around flexibility, smart homes and EVs. So very much to the point and putting consumer at the center. One element which I would like to highlight is I'm always surprised when we speak about data, about the silo which exists between from the meter and behind the meter. And when we are talking about low voltage observability in particular, I think there is a lot which we can do in reusing data from the assets, from the DER, from the sub-meters, to help grid operators to reduce congestion and so on. So I think it's very important to broaden the thinking beyond the smart meter itself, which is a bit of an hardware topic, really rethinking the meter as a measurement, as a data, and to reassure everyone, we are a supplier of home energy station. It's very easy to do the same level of accuracy on metering into this hardware as what we can do in a smart meter. So the certification and the metering hardware is not the issue. The issue is how to organize and orchestrate data sharing behind the meter and from the meter.
Fully agree.
I see fully nodding on Peter's side, but Luis, what do you think towards this?
Yeah. No, okay, thank you very much, first of all. Well, I think I agree with both of them. And I think that we need to organize a few things here. So first of all, you asked the most important thing. I think it's really important for us as citizens to understand the role of energy in our future. And I'm saying this because not I'm trying to be stoic on my speech, but more that I think we need to have a balanced system. That means that each and every player has to be aware of his own responsibility. And that means that we started, if you remember well, we started a few decades, if not more than a century ago, with it was even in the very beginning, a decentralized system. It started with small communities, and then we faced the need to increase the universality of the energy access to everyone. So we moved towards a centralized system. And we realize right now, with this move towards the renewable generation, that we need to turn it around. So we are building a decentralized system, starting from bottom up and not from top down. This makes the entire difference. I think it was during the session 2 that somebody mentioned micromanagement. And I think this is the reason why we really need to digitalize everything. It's really because we need to have knowledge, need to know what is happening on top of the grids. The consumer himself needs to know how to manage the energy and also to contribute to this transition. So just referring to what Lawrence said, I think it's really key that we reinforce cooperation between the grid and the edge, not as the grid and as the edge, but as a combination of all parts in order to solve a common equation which it is on the benefit of society. And apart from that, we also need to do it in a cost-effective way, which is very, very much important. And just remember that during these last decades, we have done a lot as DSOs to integrate already a lot of renewables in the system, to liberalize the market, and at the same time to reduce tariffs from the system. And reaching that point, I think now we need to understand that we also need to prepare the way forward. And I'm saying this because I think it's really important that instead of fighting about meters or sub-meters or energy management systems or other kind of devices, I think we really need to understand what is the role of each device in this entire equation. And then it will become very much easier for us to understand why we need to invest, why we need to prepare things for the future.
Thank you. But maybe coming back to one point and asking you again, Luis, on a point that Laurence made on the question of smart meters and what happens behind the meter. Also, do you think that the current looking on the rollout for the last years and looking to the fact that only 50% of Europeans now have a smart meter installed, are they smart enough, or what could be also done to smarten them up or to use other forms of data sources?
Well, I go back to my previous statement. I think they are smart enough, yes, and I'm going to say why. I think they are smart enough not because they are the cutting-edge technology, we know that, but because they were designed with a specific goal in mind. And that goal is very clear. And as long as they deliver what they were designed for, I think they are smart enough. And again, I think it's also important for every consumer to understand, because in the end, everyone will pay the final bill, that they were designed in a cost-effective way. So now it's possible to have a smart meter that costs less than a traditional mechanical meter and do a lot of additional functions that were not available before. And if we understand that, I don't know if it is clear for everyone. So the meter is first of all a way to measure the interaction between the grid and the edge, and also between the edge and the grid. This is the first main function of a meter. Then the second one is to inform. Is to inform the consumer, first of all, getting access to data in order to improve their their behavior, and also to inform the grid, because the grid also needs the data from the edge, or at least from the border with the edge, in order to improve its own behavior. And finally, it's also a way to act, to simplify a lot of processes that were done in the past locally, but now we are doing them remotely. That is also a very important benefit. So if I, just to summarize and just to make sure that I think it's important people understand what is the role of a meter, a smart meter, what is the role of an energy management system, what is the role of a sub-meter, and then if we all know the role of these devices, then it will be much more easier to integrate all these for the same benefit.
Thank you. Any comment or reaction?
Yeah, I think we should not oppose, and these are complementary technology. What I just want to highlight is they are behind the meter at the edge, really new ways of approaching energy management, real-time optimization, real-time response. We heard about 10 millisecond response from ENER-DG into price signals. It is now possible to do it locally behind the meter. And I think what is very important is in the way of thinking is to recognize that sometimes smart meter is enough, and sometimes it needs complementary information. And so that's very important to enable this when an EV is there and so on, because that's going to be able to self-isolate a home as an example, or is going to be able to respond to a dynamic price, and especially onto a vehicle to grid or vehicle to home as an example, where consumer on this specific subload will be very interested to go in a real-time price, because he's going to make money out of it, while he will not be interested to do it for his heating as an example, because the flexibility of heating is much less. So I think enabling behind the meter data is absolutely crucial to enable intelligence in the way to manage energy services, particularly into the home environment.
Thank you. I think the decentralized energy system is as an idea around with us since about 20 years, and now there's a lot of movement towards it. But looking towards all these new decentralized options, maybe looking towards Peter, do you also see a need of as we also talk about IoT and edge data here, about a more decentralized data management, that is, both things should be decentralized, or do we also need central operators?
Yes. Definitely. Let me say what I see and what that means for DSOs. DSOs clearly today state that they are market facilitators, and that is mostly done, also what Louis said, with centralized solutions running in the cloud, because we're coming from a centralized energy system. But the market and the regulation is changing. We see strong upcoming DER, solar panels in the grid. We see changing in the regulated processes around system operations with new roles. We see the local markets emerging with energy sharing, energy communities. So there's a lot of things going on. And then also prosumers becoming active on these markets, and also on the national wholesale market. And that all leads to the need for more data and data processing capabilities. Also data processing capabilities in real time for balancing and congestion management, also for portfolio management. And really doing that in the cloud is not realistic. So there is really a basic for decentralized data processing as well. It enables also privacy and cybersecurity aspects, because with all the appliances now coming online in the energy system, the attack surface of the energy system is going to increase. And also data processing in the edge could support and improve privacy, as the data should not be able to leave the house, but only the result of the data processing. And actually, this today is already happening, not on a smart meter, but a lot on the sub-meters. So this means for me that DSOs should start to understand that they facilitate the market as well, also with standardized and fully full and open APIs in the edge. And actually they should also open an app store providing new type of market facilitating services that serve new and existing types of market actors. Well balanced then data processing, what do you do in the cloud and what do you do in the edge, that has really significant potential for all stakeholders. Like I could talk for an hour on that, as we don't have the time. So in addressing the stake for edge computing, I would advise to take really a holistic approach, and also take on board the existing role of the smart meter there, because there's a lot of investment and really focusing on how can we make an IoT-based architecture using also the economic lifetime of the existing smart meters, but added devices to it, because doing a lot of things only in the cloud will be far too expensive. Then also what Laurent said, I really think we should say goodbye to the concept of before the meter and behind the smart meter. We just should say there's a lot of data out there in the grid edge, and actually we should come to some kind of agreements or regulation on who should have access to what, based on the purpose, and how we deal that then should be done in the energy data space, because it's in a logical say where we have access to what data. So to summarize, for me, the DSO I would advise them to develop a roadmap on the whole metering value chain, coming from forecasting, nomination. They had an inter-day portfolio management, balancing and congestion management, and then also on the metering, the allocation, and the imbalance settlement. And if you really have that complete value chain inside, then you see what functionality do you need and which data do you need, and then you can come to the idea what is clever to process locally, or what is clever to process centrally in the cloud. And actually, if you go that route, you really find out that the value of market facilitating also for existing market parties can tremendously increase. So that should be done. And from my view, I think the DSO should hurry up a little bit, because if they don't go the route, then actually I think the market will take over by doing it themselves. And because the energy transition is going faster, as what I see as the DSOs are moving.
Thanks, Peter. Before giving the floor to Luis, just as you've seen in the beginning, that when DG CONNECT and DG ENER presented together the action plan, is also a learning exercise that not one DG alone is responsible for this area. And I think also here what we find out is coordination is an important element to find effective ways of cooperation. I think the DSOs have an important play to role, but it's also the interaction with other players. So Luis, who would be the drivers, and what is the role of the DSOs in driving the digitalization forward?
Sorry, can you
just giving you the floor, bringing you into the game. So looking on cooperation across different players, yes. Looking on the role of DSOs.
Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 thoughts on that. I think first of all, normally when I listen to discussion about data, I think it's an old-fashioned discussion. I always listen to people complaining and say that DSOs need to make data available, and that seems that from the moment the DSOs start providing data, everything will be solved, and that is not the reality. I think it's even the opposite, I would say. What we are facing now is that we have a kind of infrastructure that was ready and was designed to provide their service in a certain context, and then the context changed tremendously. And we need to understand the new context. And to understand the new context, we need to get access to new data. And when I start raising this point, traditionally the answer is, okay, let's monetize the data. And I say again, no. I think it's our responsibility also as citizens to make part of this transition. So there is no room for monetization when it comes to basic operation of the system. So I think it's important that people are always, okay, how can I make money from this? This is not what we need now. Of course, there will be room for money, there will be added value, but there are basic functions that need things to be provided free of charge. And this is my first point. And the second one is that I think there is no problem in cooperation. I think everyone can cooperate as long as we see the all interests. I think this is really what matters. So do not monetize data, at least for the basic principles. Just to give you a practical example. If someone wants to sell flexibility to grid operator, then there is a certain amount of data that should be provided free of charge also to the system operator. This is the only way we can forecast and understand what is happening on top of our network and be ready for the future steps. If we go in this direction, then I think things will go right.
Thank you. Looking on the transition, Laurent, also in making some closing remarks, where would you see the future player, how data should be valorized, how's fair access of data being handled, and who should drive the process?
I think what we see into this power system changing in a system of systems is exactly the same as what happens in the digital space. So we should stop thinking in central data hubs and so on, but more into data environment interacting with each other, where the APIs are very important. And from there, of course, we'll need to define what are public and private data. What I really would really like to insist is the need to move towards real time, towards direct incentive to consumer, and as much as possible price incentives, because what we want is to consumer have interest to engage into these new interactions. So that's one of the focus which we have in Decibel moving forward.
Thank you.
May I
come in this closing sentence?
Just very short.
Maybe tell us where we would be in 10 years as a kind of outlook on
10 years outlook.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a very good question. I'm positive on that. As long as I think it was mentioned before by the European Commission that next year will be the year of skills. I think we need to also empower the skills of the citizens, because it's very, very important that people realize that they need to be the way they operate their households, their communities, and the way we operate the system should be a way of a self-balanced system. So it's a system organized bottom up. So it means that each household that has a PV panel, electric vehicle, should first of all try to be, the US guys call it grid defection. It's a strong word. I don't believe in grid defection, but it's important that people realize that they should be balanced in the way they operate their energy ecosystem. If everyone does this, that means that the dependency will lower, and that we'll have a more efficient system with the need for less investment and more capable of shelling the future. So if you ask me, what will be there in 10 years? I think we will have a very good system, the same, if not better quality of service, as long as we are committed to our goals. And we know what is our responsibility.
Thank you. Peter, in 2 sentences, a positive outlook in 10 years?
Yeah, following what Louis says, and what also Laurent said, I really think that the system of the future will be a system will be built bottom up. So in the Netherlands, we have the discussion, we call it local for local. So start to do locally what you locally produce, you locally use, and only the shortages and the surplus you interact with the wholesale market. And then you build a system which is much more resilient, where local ownership is also very, very important. So people are really attached or affected by the system, and it will be much more easier for the grid operators to handle, and also much more less expensive. Let me say it like that. But all this, to get this local for local and all these changes to accommodate, that is one thing is really really very important to understand, is that my statement, which I have said many times, that this system of the future will not be built from the silos of the past. So we will have to connect with other people. We have to work together in completely different coalitions. Otherwise, this will not happen. And there's a very nice initiative that was there from the Dutch ministry a few weeks ago, where we trialed this. And this is really starting to get a movement towards this new energy system.
Okay, Laurent.
Yeah, full support to local for locals. And I think DSOs, and congratulations E.DSO for organizing these very interesting debates, are well positioned to facilitate, I would say, this development of local for locals markets.
Thank you. And this is positive words. I thank my panel and give the floor back to Roberto.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. And now for the last stint, I know we are running some 25 minutes late, but somehow inevitable. Susanna Phobis Magurova. Ciao, Susanna. Very much welcome. Up to you to summon your comment.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon to you all. I know we're out of time before even starting, but I hope you can bear with us for at least a few key messages on the very interesting topic of investment into digitalization of the grids. I am Susanna Phobis Magurova. I work in the regulatory management team of E.ON, and I have 2 excellent speakers here with me. On the right side, we have Sean Ennis from CERE, the Center on Regulation in Europe. And on the left side, we have Michael, also from E.ON, who is a grid smartification expert. And since we are running out of time, as I said, I will skip the first two warm-up questions I've prepared, and I will jump directly into the core topic of this panel, which is, of course, the investment. So maybe, Michael, we can start. Can you tell us, so how can DSOs actually identify the right level of investment into the grids, and especially where to allocate it?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. Thanks a lot. Yeah, so maybe from my side, also happy to be here today. How to allocate the right investments? That's of course the main tricky question you have to solve as a DSO all over Europe now, facing the energy transition. With its steep increase of renewables, but also of consumer applications, the electrification of the heating sector, of the mobility sector, all these challenges we face now. What we do as DSOs, as E.ON, to make it as concrete as possible, is we steeply increase the observability of our distribution system. We steeply increase the observability of our MV system and of our LV systems as well. So we will be capable of having full observability of our MV systems in Germany until 2026, until the end of 2026, and 1/3 of our LV system. That gives us a clear view of where the current system is as it is designed. So how much reserve is left, how are the actors on the system really acting, and then building up on this, we will of course use modern things, because all these sensor values are of course stored on the cloud. So we will use pattern recognition functionalities, similar things, to identify where are similarities, so what can we learn for areas of the system where we do not have the observability yet. And then we use also forecast technologies. So we of course also forecast what will we see in renewables, how much will be there connected in the next years, because as you know, and it was mentioned several times today, that we have a life expectancy of classical grid investments of about 40 to 50 years. So if we invest in copper or in aluminum, we will have to make sure that it is capable of doing its service for the next 40 to 50 years, which is in such a dynamic development as we face it today, a very complicated question to solve. So we have to somehow oversize our system today to make sure that it will be capable of doing its service for the next 40 years, for as long as it will be there. And that is also something which is challenging maybe for regulation, because if we build up this system for challenges to come for in the next 10 to 20 years, then of course this system, looking at it today, will be oversized. And that's one very challenging question, of course. At least I have the impression also for regulation to make sure that we all agree that this is the most efficient way to do grid reinforcement, to do grid expansion today.
Perfect. Thank you very much. You mentioned a lot of interesting points, building the grids today for the future. So looking at the future, Sean, what do you see in taking a bit broader view in the renewable energy landscape? So what are the investment opportunities there in the future?
Well, if I can just focus on one particular use case, which is bidirectional EV smart charging, I'd like to do that if that's okay. And in so doing, I'm going to be referring to a report that was recently released by CERE, of which I was a co-author with Giuseppe Colangelo, and it's called Energy Data Sharing in the Case of EV Smart Charging. So all the comments I'm going to make are much elaborated in that report, and that's why I mention it.
We will read it.
Okay, so the thought here is that this is EV smart charging could require an increase in overall system capacity of up to 30%, right? This has been, these sorts of numbers have been put forwards. And yet, if you have local for local, that might not be the case to the same extent. But it's very hard to know now what the right level of investment is for the DSOs. On the other hand, if you accept that this whole use case scenario involves investment by multiple operators simultaneously over a period of more than a decade, it's actually quite a complex problem to solve, and maybe one that's not immediately soluble unless you push the investment decisions off to small units that are each trying to make profitable investments for themselves. And so you can think of the purchase of the cars, the purchase of the smart charging infrastructure, and making sure that it's bidirectional, all have to be incentivized appropriately in the systems, as well as the rollout of any broader capacities by the DSOs. So one of the principles that we would advocate is making sure that profitable storage is incentivized to occur, but not unprofitable storage. So maybe I'll stop there for this question.
Exactly. Michael, do you have any thoughts on that, especially the storage and the build out of the grids regarding EV?
Yeah, I would put it in a more general term as flexibility. So I'm still looking forward to flexibility. We discuss flexibility and the use of flexibility to the operation and also to the design of the distribution system since many years now. And I'm really looking forward to an agreement which has to be found between all stakeholders involved, of course, on how we would use flexibility so that it's for the sake of all parties involved. Of course, we have an interest in there as distribution system operators, because that would facilitate a more efficient operation and maybe also a more efficient layout of our distribution system, avoiding this oversizing, which has just been mentioned. But we still lack this agreement, which, yes, I'm as a DSO would first like to wait for.
And maybe I could just add one point, which is I think that the standardization that we were just talking about is actually quite relevant for the ultimate investment incentives. So in particular, it could very well be the case that if there's a failure to require an appropriate degree of openness at an early stage in EV smart charging, then the right distribution of incentives for investment will be lacking. Some parties will have a very high incentive for investment because they perhaps have mini monopoly profits to earn, which could be the case for car manufacturers. But if you adopt an appropriate openness standard, then these decisions over investment will be much disaggregated and go much wider than car manufacturer or smart charger decisions.
We had a lot of topics you actually already talked about or touched upon. So in your point of view, what are the most, I would say, interesting or important investment fields for the next years?
Well, maybe from my point of view, as I just mentioned, for the next year, very short term, of course, I'm heavily engaged in rolling out all these sensors we need in our MV and LV systems. All the infrastructure, which has also been mentioned today, like telecommunication connection to all these distributed sensors we have in our, for example, secondary substations. So that are the short-term challenges, building up the cloud system, and then also the advanced cloud system functionalities we would like to use. So like pattern recognition, which I have already just mentioned, pattern recognition, maybe artificial intelligence, some expert system which sends out at least recommendations to our field staff how to operate the system, or maybe sending out a warning signal that there is still live voltage on on this asset and warning that it shouldn't be touched directly. So things like that, use cases we see here, we now have to develop. And then, of course, in the long term, flexibility and how we could incorporate flexibility in our very conservative business as it is today. So we are opening up for digitization. We are now integrating all this cloud technology, but it's still the way of job as we do it. We are not really interacting, but we are still the facilitator, and we are not, market partner is maybe a word too strong, but we're not yet there to use flexibility for our own purposes.
And maybe one point on smart charging stations is that we're still at a stage of enormous rollout of smart charging stations, and there's not a very high level of rollout of bidirectional charging stations. And bidirectionality can be a very important aspect in the future. At the moment, there's something of a significant cost difference between the two types of station, but in the long run, I think there'll be a much less cost difference, and it's important to roll that out early to get the whole system in place for the later advantages that will come from bidirectional smart charging, which is a bit like doubling the benefits of unidirectional smart charging, because unidirectional smart charging can reduce the demand of peak load, but bidirectional allows for contribution to solving the peak load and making sure that renewable sources of energy can be pulled into use at the times when they're needed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the very hands-on examples. I think it's quite important to also understand how the smartification of the grid works out in real life. Maybe now I would like to turn to you, dear audience. Do you have any more questions? I still have a few, but I would like to give you the opportunity to ask something to our experts. No one? Okay, then I stick to my paper here. So maybe not the last question, but one more before the last, very short one. So what factors do you see driving capital growth in the investment into the digital infrastructure? Maybe Sean?
Yeah, well, as an economist, I would say rate of return is the key factor. So the higher the rate of return, the faster the rate of investment will be. And making sure that the rate of return is truly positive is absolutely fundamental.
Thank you.
Yeah, so as representing a DSO and with its regulated monopoly, it's quite clear that we are fully depending on regulation and the regulatory framework, and that is also one challenge we face, because by investing more in digitalization, that has also been mentioned today. We on the one hand, we are shortening our investment periods. So Claire was it who mentioned 5 years versus 50 years. It might be not that clear, but yes, something like that. So shortening the investment cycles, which is something you do not necessarily like to do. And on the other hand, usually investment in digitalization technology is coupled with a larger share of OPEX and classical distribution system technology. So if you invest in aluminum and copper, you usually, if you have a new investment, you have nearly no OPEX needs for this investment in the first years, and then you start sometimes with maintenance, but that will be some years ago. And for electronics, you have maintenance classical maintenance, not in the classical maintenance as you do for copper and aluminum, but you need more field staff to go there to install firmware updates, for example. So that will increase your OPEX, and that is something which isn't incentivized by the regulatory framework in Europe currently. And we have to really analyze and then also derive and agree how to adapt the regulatory framework to put us in a position to really go for digitalization. Because as said, I see the clear need also from a technical perspective to do so. So to manage all these volatile intermittent generation and demand, we need more digitalization in our distribution system, and we need the right incentives there for us as distribution system operators.
We have seen in the very first presentation that incentivizing the smartification and digitalization is one of the key points of the action plan. So I'm very much looking forward to the debate. But now we do have a question, so.
Thank you. I abuse the privilege if no one else in the room wants to. I asked my question as a former Deputy Director General of E.DSO, so I've been deep in the standardization, and I lived through the transition from analog to digital in the telecoms industry and the evolution from fixed to mobile. The operators, the telco service providers, when they made that transition, they recognized that mobile was a very different value proposition than fixed. And so they went out and they hired people to run mobile operators who were not engineers. They were people who had sold Coca-Cola. They were people who had worked in FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods. My question is a provocative one. Does the E.DSO and your entire community need a mind shift change in its leadership in order to take on board the challenges of digitalization?
That's a tough one. Who wants to start?
Well, maybe if you allow, I will start. So yes, so your question's warmly welcome, and I can agree to you. Yes, we really see a change here. We really see a change in industry. So there is a shift away from this, not only from this classical design and this classical operation of the distribution system, but also from the classical skill set. We do not need these what we call blue collar worker and white collar worker, but we need programmers. We need colleagues who are experts of digital technologies, who can, for example, program or can work with the cloud environment and analyze these huge amounts of data which we have there now once we started installing all these sensors. And then, of course, derive knowledge from that, which can be used for this more or less conventional business because it's still there. So we have now both skills on board, and of course these skills on digitization have to be strengthened in our business, in our industry.
Sean, do you agree?
I agree, I think, but I'm also perhaps not as informed as Michael, so I'll leave it then to you.
Perfect, thank you very much. So now I come actually to my last question. So what are your concluding thoughts on, let's say, the future of digitalized energy assets in general? Sean, maybe you want to start?
Just that regulators have to play the game. So regulators have to be present at the table and guaranteeing that they're not going to change their tune in 5 years' time or 10 years' time after investments have been made. I think that kind of certainty is really important. And at the same time, government may have a role in providing subsidies where there is an absence of profitable opportunity, but a need for investment.
Perfect. Thank you very much for pointing this out. Michael?
Yeah, I can of course agree to Sean. So the design of the right regulatory framework, of the right incentives is of course one challenge we face. And I can tell from my personal point of view that I really love working in this industry because we're facing a lot of challenges. It's not only the energy transition, it's of course also finding the right regulatory framework and also doing new technologies or transferring digital technologies which have been developed, for example, for communication industry, then to the energy industry at the same time with a different mindset, because we, of course, have a closer focus on security, on safety, of course, and also on resilience. And I think we all together jointly can learn a lot how to do that in the right way. And that might be transferred to other industry sectors as well afterwards. So really challenging environment, and I love to be here.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I hope that you do speak for all of us that we love to work in this industry. So that was it for us. We could talk about this topic, of course, for much longer, but our time is running out. So thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the audience here in the room and online for listening to us. And now I will hand over to Zeni for what I think is the closing remarks.
Thank you. You already did the job somehow. So yeah, I want to thank you. I mean, for the one remaining in the room and the ones online. I think this event was better than we imagined. We achieved thought-provoking issues. So I want to thank you first, the team who helped both DG CONNECT and DG ENER. Thanks for being here today. And I think what we had in mind behind this event was to calibrate the views, and that's what we achieved. Does not necessarily mean we have to agree on everything. It's just calibrated to the terms where we can achieve a common denominator. So it has never been more timely to discuss about digital transformation, especially in the energy sector. That is the main outcome, I would say. Specifically, the action plan accelerated the momentum. So that's why we revealed what is behind the action plan. And hopefully we will see how this will be implicated in the future for our sector. Now, a few takeaways. I hope you will take them with you before we jump into the coffee or whatever refreshments are waiting for us in the next room. First one, I would like to follow the outcome from the first panel, which is we need to follow the digitalization and technology. And we need to match the highest level of technology with a higher level of trust and not the other side. Then standardization has become the key message of this event, it seems, and we need to maximize the interoperability of system and devices and therefore ensure that markets remain open, therefore, to allow us to have flexibility services and other services. Digital infrastructures, this is another key takeaway. We have to have first-class connectivity and it has to become a must, and the ability to make the most of the data of economy. Then we concluded today with investments, because everything we put in our mouth, we have to follow with the right money. Therefore, the investments are needed more than ever. But something that also our colleague Luis Cunha mentioned, it's the investments, yes, infrastructure, yes, data, yes, but also the skills. We need to upgrade the skills of the people and citizens in order to understand the digital transformation. Which all this allow me to close. Today's discussion put me in mind with something which I usually attribute to Goethe. I don't want to be philosophical here, but I like what he says. The greatest things in this world is not so much where we stand as in what direction we are moving. So I hope this is the right takeaway message, which means I think it is time to finish that we started and we are moving in the right direction, to make the hope that we heard from our speakers today and to make it a reality. It is time to move in the right direction, and that will help us to deliver together the shared goal and vision. So thank you again and have a nice evening.